most people, Father's Day is a fun time where people remind their dads how much they mean to them. But for me, it's just a reminder of the hell that I went through. I lived with my parents back then. They had a decently large house, so there was plenty of room for me, and they didn't seem to mind that I hadn't moved out. All of my siblings had already left, so it was just me there with my parents. I honestly felt like an only child half the time because my siblings never visited, and we weren't very close. Of course, I wasn't very close with my parents either. Even though I lived with them, I still felt like I barely spent any time with them. My mom would always be at work or with friends. I was usually just at home with my dad. Not that he was ever around me either. He was always building and doing construction in the basement, as he was renovating it to lease for tenants whenever he was finished. I was even less close with him than I was with my mom. He was very standoffish and always acted like I was a nuisance. Sometimes, I would offer to help him with whatever he was doing, but he always told me to F off. Usually, I just left him alone. Then one year, Father's Day was coming up. I decided that I should try to do something to connect with my dad for once. So one night, I decided to ask my dad if he needed any help, as he was always working in the basement when he got home from work and barely slept.
Hey Dad, do you need help with anything?
He looked especially bad that night, like he hadn't slept in days. His face was haggard and his eyes were bloodshot.
You want to help me?
I had expected him to just tell me to leave him alone like usual, but this time he seemed almost excited.
Everything is almost ready. I just need to install one more door.
I told him that I was happy to help him, and I was excited to see how everything looked, so he took me downstairs. When we entered the basement, the first thing I remember noticing was how unfinished it looked. It didn't look even close to being ready for someone to live down there. There was dust and debris everywhere. I honestly struggled to see what my dad had even been doing for so long. The only thing that made it look like he had done anything were the doors. There were a bunch of them, one after the other. I felt strangely nervous, but I slowly followed my dad as he led me through the weird twisting hallways. We must have walked through 7 different doors, each leading deeper into the surprisingly large basement, before my dad finally stopped. We had finally made it to the door frame that still needed the door installed. My dad had told me to hold the heavy door in place while he screwed it on. I struggled to keep it steady, but I didn't want to say anything. I was just glad that he was finally letting me help him. When he had finally finished screwing on the door, he took a step back, and I let go of the door. My dad swung it back and forth a couple of times to make sure it stayed put. Then he looked up at me and said,
You know what would make this Father's Day really special?
No, what?
For you to be my lab rat.
Then out of nowhere, my dad grabbed the door and slammed it on my face, trapping me in the cellar.
Dad? Dad! What are you doing?
I couldn't understand if it was a prank or not. I was freaking out though. I started banging on the door wildly as he laughed like a psycho on the other side. After that night, the next 24 years of my life would be a living hell. I was trapped in a house of horror. I literally became his lab rat. He kept me in that same room at all times, never letting me out for even a second. He would bring me just enough food to keep me alive, but it was hardly anything. For the next 24 years, I lived as his slave. Every day he would use me for his needs. It was like he had never even been my father. He was able to convince my mom that I had run away to join a cult. He even forced me to write several letters to make her believe that I was okay. My mom totally bought the story, so no one ever came looking for me. During my imprisonment, I would birth several children. I never got to keep them for long though. He would take them away from me almost immediately and pretend that I had left them on the front porch for him and my mom to take care of. It was horrible. After the first year, I surrendered to the idea that I would never get away, and I probably would have been right if it wasn't for one of the babies. All those years later, I finally convinced the monster to bring myself and one of the kids to the hospital because the baby was sick. He must have thought that he had broken me completely, because he didn't even seem afraid that I would try to run away. When I got to the hospital, I got the chance to tell them what was going on. They called the police and arrested him immediately. He was charged not long after. I was finally free. Ever since then, it's been hard for me to get used to having a normal life again. I'm traumatized by every Father's Day now. I don't see him as a father anymore though. To me, he's nothing but a monster. This story was inspired by the most evil father that we had to feature him in the Father's Day video. We featured him in a past video but wanted to revisit his heinous crimes. The man we are referring to is Josef Fritzl. Josef Fritzl's notoriety began in 2008 when his daughter reappeared 24 years after she went missing. She had spent those years locked in the cellar below the Fritzl family home in the city of Ostend, Austria. Fritzl kept his daughter Elizabeth locked in the cellar from when she was 18 until she reached the age of 42. Trapped underground and enslaved, she was tortured and abused thousands of times by her own father, which resulted in the birth of 7 children. Fritzl started building the cellar stretching below the house and the garden years before he took Elizabeth into captivity. He asked for his 18-year-old daughter's help to hang the final door, then held an ether-soaked cloth to her mouth and locked her in the cellar. Elizabeth had run away before, and while her mother filed a missing persons report, Fritzl's story that she had run away to join a cult was easily believed. He forced his daughter to write letters supporting the story. While 3 of the children were kept in the cellar, 3 others would quote-unquote appear near the house with notes purportedly from Elizabeth, saying she could not take care of them. They were raised by Fritzl and his wife Rosemary. In 2008, Elizabeth's 19-year-old daughter became ill. After Fritzl took her to the hospital, police issued an appeal for Elizabeth to come forward. In the week following, Fritzl released Elizabeth from the cellar and the police were alerted to her reappearance. When they questioned the now 42-year-old, she revealed that she had been held captive for more than 2 decades. Fritzl was then immediately arrested and jailed for life in 2009.
When I was younger, Father's Day was something my sister and I dreaded. We never felt comfortable in the house, and our parents were very cold. However, of the 2 of them, our father was much worse. Whenever he was home from work, he would always look at me and my sister weirdly, and he would do this thing where he would touch us and then run back on the couch and get all giddy like a lunatic. It was creepy as hell, and we had no say in whatever he did as our mother didn't seem to care. Sometimes, it seemed like she enjoyed watching him make us uncomfortable. Normal families go shopping together and pick out clothes for school and church. Our version of that was much different. Every once in a while, our parents would gift us a set of women's clothing. The clothes rarely ever fit, as they were clearly meant for an adult, but our parents would make us wear them anyway. It was weird as hell. There was a time when we complained and asked to be taken shopping for clothes that fit us. That resulted in one of the worst beatings of our lives up to that point. Obviously, we never made a fuss about the strange clothes ever again. As my sister and I grew closer to puberty, our father started to say increasingly unsettling things to us. He would always say that one day he was going to break us in. At the time, we had no idea what it meant, but it still made our skin crawl. Our mother told us not to worry, and would often make odd jokes about what she would do to him if he didn't let her know beforehand. She said it was a mother's duty to observe her daughters during that time so she could teach them what to do. I tried to brush it off as just another weird thing adults say, but as time went on, these comments became a daily occurrence. Slowly, I started to realize what he had meant. My sister knew too, but all we could do was wait in terror for the day to come to find out for sure. In the time leading up to Father's Day, our father was more invasive and erratic than ever. Our father had taken to reminding us that Father's Day would be the day he would break us in. And as always, my mother didn't seem to care. If anything, it seemed like she was excited for Father's Day. Over time, my father had gotten increasingly more comfortable with tormenting my sister and I. He developed a habit of coming into our rooms at night, lunging on top of our beds and trying to pull off our nightgowns.
Daddy?
Come here! Take that stupid thing off! These clothes are just getting in my way!
Get off of me! Let me go!
Shut up! It's time to break you in!
Will you cut it out? I'm trying to get some sleep.
I'll get you next time, bitch!
Since then, my sister and I started wearing school clothes to bed. We didn't want to deal with the fear of him attacking us any longer. The attacks became bolder as Father's Day drew closer. The thing that consumed my thoughts was, what was he planning? And why the hell was he waiting for Father's Day? I didn't want to find out. Me and my sister lost sleep leading up to it. The night before Father's Day, my sister and I were starkly awake in our bedroom, expecting the absolute worst of the horrors to come our way at any second. Our father was dangerous and crazy. I wanted to run away. I wanted to hide at the neighbor's house, or find a policeman to help us. I tried for hours to convince my sister to go with me, but despite all the things I said, she refused. She was too afraid of what our father might do if he caught us trying to escape. At midnight, I made my decision. I knew my father wouldn't wait to get what he was after. I said goodbye to my sister, opened the bedroom window, then jumped out of the house to freedom. Not 5 seconds after I started running, I heard the bedroom door burst open, and then all I heard was the screams of my sister. I ran to a nearby neighbor's house, then pounded on the door and begged them to call the police. Unfortunately, by the time the police arrived, it was already too late for my sister. She was already taken out by that evil sicko. My parents were arrested, and then all of the rotten details of the truth came to light. My parents had lured and murdered over a dozen women, all while my sister and I slept completely unaware. The strange clothes we were forced to wear were the last things the victims wore. I would be lying if I told you I didn't think about that rotting piece of shit every time Father's Day comes around. Years have passed, and I still have trouble burying the horrific memories in the back of my mind. I still grieve over my sister, and I contemplate if she would still be alive if she had ran out of the house with me on that day they call Father's Day. The story was inspired by a horrific Father's Day occurrence regarding a father named Fred West, who told his daughters that he would quote-unquote one day break them in. The victim, Mae West, now 46, has written about how her serial killer dad would threaten both her and her sister Heather, who ultimately got taken out by the father. The sisters lived with their parents, which became known as the House of Horrors, where Fred and his wife Rosemary killed at least 10 young women, including Heather. Mae reveals in her diary that at first, Fred's frequent comments about a father's quote-unquote right to take his daughter's virginity seemed like a joke, but as they approach puberty, they seem more like a threat. Mae also reveals how Fred would lunge at them at the slightest opportunity, especially if they were wearing their school uniform, and he even snuck into their room before they woke up just to torment them. Mae has also stated,
"When I was about 8, we discovered a cupboard full of women's clothes and shoes. Heather and I used to dress up in them, and Mom didn't seem to mind. Only much later did I realize that they were the clothes of young women who'd been murdered in the house."
Every Father's Day, I'm reminded of how lucky I am to be a dad. I have a wife and daughter, and I never stop being thankful to have them in my life. I'm sure most dads would say the same, but for me it means a lot more. After what happened, I can't think about things the same way ever again. I'll never forget how close I came to losing everything. It happened years ago. My wife was a teacher, and my daughter was in high school. Up until then, we had a pretty typical life. There hadn't really been any surprises. Maybe that's why I was so unprepared for what happened. It was close to Father's Day. We had all planned to go on a vacation together as a family to celebrate the occasion. We hadn't gotten away in a while, so we were all very excited, my daughter especially. As it got closer to the day, we became busy with packing and getting everything ready to leave. One day, my wife and daughter went to get haircuts together. My daughter said that they had to look their best for all of the vacation photos that we would take. I waited at home while they went. Then we were all going to have lunch together. After a while, I realized that it was taking longer than usual. They should have been back at least an hour ago. I decided to call my wife to see what was holding them up. I dialed the phone and waited through several rings, but there was no answer. I thought it was strange because my wife always answered the phone quickly, but I figured that she just hadn't seen the call. Still, I couldn't help but feel slightly concerned, so I called the hair salon to see if they were still there. "Hello, I'm just calling to see if my wife and daughter are still there."
No, sir. They actually left a few hours ago.
I began to feel incredibly nervous. I called my daughter just to make sure, and she didn't answer either. That's when I started to really panic. I called the police and told them what was going on, and they headed over to the salon to check the security footage. I wasn't ready for what they found. The footage showed them walking out of the hair salon and running into a masked man holding a firearm. He forced them into a vehicle and drove away. They had been kidnapped. I was absolutely hysterical. I couldn't believe it. I had just seen them that morning, and now they were being held hostage by some psycho with a gun. Days and nights went by without any leads. There were no ransom notes, no videotapes sent to my house, nothing. They had just vanished. None of it made any sense. The police couldn't figure out why someone would have wanted to kidnap my family. I didn't have any money, and none of us were very important. There was no reason for any of it. I stopped sleeping as soon as they were taken. At first, it was because I was up all night driving around looking for them. Then, even when I was finally so exhausted that I tried to sleep, I couldn't. I developed insomnia from all the worry and stress that I was going through every second. If I wasn't out looking for them, I was in my bed weeping. I had to cancel the vacation, of course. All I could think about was how excited my daughter had been to go. I got so depressed that I couldn't even eat. I was miserable. It was absolute hell. I was constantly plagued by thoughts of them in pain or being tied up in a room somewhere. I couldn't stop myself from thinking the worst. Maybe they were already dead. Then one night, the night of Father's Day, I got a call from a payphone.
Hello? Dad?
It was from my daughter.
Yes, honey. Where are you? Are you okay? When can you come home?
I don't know. He has us trapped here. I don't know where we are.
Who? Who has you, honey? Listen to me. I'm going to find you. Just tell me where you are.
I don't...
Hello? Hello, where are you? I'm going to find you. Please. Please let me find you. Please come home, honey. Please. Ah!
I immediately called the cops and told them what happened. They were able to track the payphone, but they still couldn't find the culprit. I lost all hope after that. I felt like I completely lost my mind. Days and nights flew by with me barely noticing them. I still didn't eat or sleep. All I could do was wait by the phone just in case my daughter somehow managed to call me again. I knew it was unlikely, but it was all I had left. Several weeks went by. I still hadn't heard anything. Then I got a call from the police. My wife and daughter had managed to escape. The culprit was revealed to be a man named Myuu. My wife used to teach him years ago. Apparently, during that time he had developed a deep obsession with her and had been following her ever since, waiting for the right time to kidnap her. That's what had happened that day. After kidnapping them, the man had driven off to the house where he had planned to keep them in prison. Halfway through the ride, my wife and daughter were making too much noise, so the man stopped to stuff them into his trunk. A nearby bystander witnessed the whole thing, and the culprit ended up taking him out with a metal rod. Police later confirmed that the bystander had been killed. At the house where he hid them, the man kept my wife and daughter locked in a closet for most of the day. They were finally able to escape his captivity when my wife was able to pick the lock on the closet door while the man was away. I'll never forget those weeks where I thought I had lost my family. It was easily the worst time of my life. I'm just happy that the Father's Day call wasn't the last I heard from them. The story was inspired by a disturbing Father's Day incident regarding two females, a mom and daughter. The daughter's name was Beth Stauffer, and her 36-year-old mother's name was Mary, who happened to be a former high school teacher. The pair had decided to get haircuts before their family would fly overseas to the Philippines. But after making their way back to their car, a 29-year-old man named Myuu held them at gunpoint and demanded they get into his car. The mother would later learn that the man was her former student she taught 15 years ago at a Minnesota high school. Myuu would bound and stuff both Mary and Beth into the trunk of his car. Myuu would later pull over and threaten the pair if they tried to escape. That's when two males passing by noticed Mary and Beth in the trunk, causing Myuu to hurl one of them into the trunk as well and eventually take him out. The victim's name was Jason Wilkman. Myuu would later arrive at his house and keep the pair captive for the next 7.5 weeks. Myuu had developed a dangerous obsession with the mother and had stalked her family and tried to kidnap her on at least 4 different occasions before eventually succeeding. During the pair's captivity, Myuu allowed the daughter to make a phone call to her dad on Father's Day at a local payphone. The pair would eventually manage to escape when Myuu was at work. Once freed, Mary called the police and hid with her daughter in Myuu's backyard until officers showed up. Myuu was soon arrested at his workplace and went on to stand trial for the kidnapping. He was later found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. He was also sentenced to another 40 years for the murder of the bystander Jason Wilkman.